So our next step, now that we have the Nextcloud installed and up and running, verified and checked through using the Firefox browser, and you have the administrator an account created along with installing the recommended apps, what we're going to do next is put the server on a part of our own network, so an intranet, if you will, but in this case we're actually going to use a NAT network. VirtualBox is a Type 2 hypervisor setup, which means the VirtualBox is installed on top of an already existing operating system. So there's already an IP, there's already internet connection coming into our host system, and what we're doing in order to give an IP address to any of the machines that we virtualize, we have to kind of break off a piece of that incoming connection. And VirtualBox uses what's called a NAT network, which is short for Network Address Translation. So that way we can give each machine its own little slice of internet accessibility. On the previous install, or what we may have done up to this point, and what you'll have to do is just verify. I'll go through these steps just to make sure some of us had got to where we created a second adapter for the machine, and we had on that second adapter we put that in an internal only type connection, so that way we could get the both the server and the client to connect. So let's make a quick change there with your system to make sure you don't have that anymore, because we're gonna do the NAT network route instead. Or if you don't have it, that's just as well, because then you would just pick up at this point in what we're doing anyway. If the machine is on, the server is on, for right now we'll leave the desktop going. We can do that second, or in a secondary video. That way this video only concentrates on getting the server that we create the NAT network, and then we also get the server on that network. So you can shut down the server if it's open. So I'm going to go up to the power sign. It's a better idea now that we've got everything kind of working. It's a good idea to use like a standard operation for powering it out of the machine, rather than the X. At this point, you would start to use the X if something's stuck, and like the only option to power off the machine is that. It's better to use the your standard operations, because the X is kind of like pulling the electrical cord out of the back of a computer. So I want to, under the power or the battery area, I want to click on the power off and power off. Okay, so that machine is down, and you can tell from the VirtualBox main menu screen when a machine is on or off by if it says powered off there, it's off. If it says save, that means it's in a save state. For some of these options, when we come to the screen that we do when we make changes to like memory, and now the NAT network area, this whole process is virtualized, but you have to imagine that these are physical machines somewhere. So in order to do some of these operations, we have to pretend that they are a physical machine. So that would require us to go in and physically add more memory, another memory stick to the motherboard, or in this case, when we're adding or taking away an Ethernet adapter, that would be us going into the machine and actually adding a NIC card or taking one away. So my Ubuntu server is here at the bottom, and it is powered off. I want to go to the settings area, click on network. What we had before, we had an adapter 1 and adapter 2. If you still have an adapter 2, just uncheck the enable option. So that way, that's like opening up the machine and actually pulling out the physical network card. And then come back to adapter 1. If you didn't have one before, then don't worry about unchecking the enable, because it wasn't there in the first place. So coming back to adapter 1, it's set to NAT, which for now is fine. Just click OK. What we need to do next is in our VirtualBox main menu or manager menu, click on File, click on Tools here under File, Network Manager. And you can see here there's some tabs for the different types of networks that we can have, a host only, a NAT, and cloud networks. What we are working with is the NAT network, so make sure that is the one that is selected. And likely it's probably empty here. So click Create. It will create one immediately here called NAT network. It will give it should already set up an IPv4 and prefix for you, and it should also already enable the DHCP server. I'm going to delete this. Well, actually, before I delete it, that is good to go. And what we want to do here is we don't need to change anything else. I mean, if you know a lot about networking and you want to like create different network addresses, you certainly can here. But you just make sure that you know what you're doing when it comes to creating IP addresses, subnetting, and also how to work with the what the /24, what the net mask means. So it is in our best interest at the moment to not change anything here. The only thing that we want to change is the name of the network. If you don't have this screen at the bottom, you can also right-click on that network and click on Properties. That should open this screen at the bottom. I would call it something, some people in class I said just call it IST421 network, or I shortened mine to just 421 network. Something different than that network, just so the idea behind that is we could create multiple intranets here through VirtualBox if we had a whole bunch of different machines connected. So I'm going to delete this instance because I already have it existing up here. And again, so this was the original net network that I created. I just changed the name to 421 network. Again, all of this should look the same. Since I've already booted up the machine a few times in between creating this, in that process it did create the IPv6 prefix. For right now, if yours is empty, don't worry about that. Eventually it will populate it. So a couple things to note here is in creating IPv4 addresses, our address here is 10.0.2.0 with a /, a net mask, or 24 bits. Anything with when you're talking about a network, anything with a .0 address, that is reserved for the name of the network. It's called, sometimes those words are flipped around. So network name. The network name is 10.0.2.0. And that's how the computer identifies this particular network. And then usually from the network name, so 0 is not given to any nodes or any devices that are on that network. It's reserved for the name itself. And then usually what happens next would be 10.0.2.1 would be reserved for, so the .1 address is usually reserved for a router or the server that might be issuing the DHCP values. Most likely, though, in most cases, the .1 is going to be reserved for a router, at least the incoming router from whoever is providing the internet in the first place, the ISP, i.e. Verizon or something along those lines, Comcast, whoever it is. And then above that, usually what happens above .0 and .1, the next couple addresses are usually kind of reserved. They're reserved for static devices, i.e. like maybe another router. If there's a server on the network, we want to have a static address to the server, because I don't want it to change to have it get a new IP address every couple of days, because then I have to reconnect all the computers to that server. So having a static server is usually in the best interest. So those first couple of addresses are reserved for other, again, static devices, maybe a printer as well. Same thing with a server. If a printer keeps moving IP addresses, you're not going to be able to print to it every couple of days. So beyond that, we give usually our client machines, laptops, whatever, things that don't matter in terms of that I need to access my coworker's desk next to me. I don't need to access his files on his computer or her files on her computer. so that doesn't need to be a static based IP address. And then the DHCP server, DHCP is short for Dynamic Host Control Protocol. That is the protocol that issues out IP addresses. So what will likely happen when we boot this up? This server will probably be given an address of 10.0.2.4. It could be .5. It also could not. We have seen instances in the class where we are getting this to work, but the address from the original setup, the 10.0.2.15, did not change. So it's likely it still could be 15, because actually 15 still falls within this network realm, so it's possible that it's taking that. It's likely over a period of time that, since we're not going to static the server's address at this point, it's likely that one point on a restart that it does go from 15 to something else. And if there's any issues there, we'll take care of those when we cross that, if we cross that bridge. So again, likely it'll be 10.0.2.4 or 5, and it's enabled. So the two devices that can issue out addresses is a router or a server, and you can have them set up either way. In our case, usually in small organizations or organizations where you're going to have a lot of like public connections, you're probably going to have the router issue out DHCP commands, i.e. issue out addresses. More usually in a more of a company setup or at school here, like the actual computer labs, they're probably being issued addresses from a server. Okay, so with that hopefully explained and understood, these are our settings, and this network is good. You should be able to click apply at the bottom. So I don't need to click apply because I've already made this. I'm not making any changes to it. So just make sure before exiting this, you hit apply so it's set up. Once that's created, you can go back to the Ubuntu server, click on settings, click on network, and we want to attach it to, instead of NAT this time, we're attaching it to NAT network. So click that. And by default, what should come up is the one that you made, because it's the only one we made. If we made like 3 or 4 networks, you could drop that down and select which network you need this machine connected to. But since that's the only one, that's what's there. I didn't mean to click the advanced. And then once that change is made on the adapter 1 for the server, click OK. And then you can start it up. So again, we power it down so that way, for 2 reasons. The biggest one is doing these adding and taking away network cards are more of a physical aspect to computing. So I would not want the computer to be on in that process, because you would mess it up by just, if it was on, just opening up and just taking out a network card. We created a virtual network there, so in terms of like powering on and off isn't that necessary, because it's not really a physical network. However, the advantage to also shutting it down leads to that second option I said, is powering the machine off, having it in an off state, and then making that change, putting it on the network. That helps on the reboot to acquire and take the new settings. So that way we don't have to kind of hopefully like mess around with that. So we're going to type in the password here. And what we want to do is try to look up our IP address. So click on your 9 dot menu option to bring up the terminal. And we want to run in Windows, it's ipconfig. In Linux and Mac, it is ifconfig. And that is one word, ifconfig. Hit enter. If you get this command ifconfig is not found, but it can be installed with nettools. So we need the nettools small application in order to use the ifconfig. I believe that there is a network manager